Good evening, ma'am. I hope I'm audible.
Yeah, you're audible. Thank you.
So everyone, I would love to introduce our guest for today's session, Celia Sandhya Daniels. If you have any questions for at the end of the session, please feel free to comment down below. Ma'am, please take the lead.
I'm sorry?
Ma'am, first I'll introduce you and then you may take your lead. Is that all right?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yes. Celia is a program manager with over 20 years of demonstrated success in operating, growing, and spearheading strategic healthcare and life sciences programs in the US. She has been recognized for customer satisfaction and delivering innovative projects, leading and overseeing multiple projects and global teams both on-site, offshore. Celia is an Asian Indian trans woman of color who is an entrepreneur, public speaker, activist, motivator, musician, artist, photographer, and filmmaker. She writes and speaks passionately about her struggles and challenges she faced in her family, work, school, and community, both in the US and India. She struggled with stigma, discrimination, gender dysphoria, and was yet able to overcome it. As a management consultant with top Fortune 500 companies, she educates, empowers, and advocates for transgender and gender non-binary individuals in the corporate world. She has built allyship with local businesses, police departments, therapists, doctors, churches, and civil rights organizations in the US and in India to educate them about bullying, transgender violence, discrimination, healthcare policies, and employment. She has multiple achievements under her belt, including HRC's Equality Award for Outstanding Commitment Service to our community in 2019, former international ambassador for Sahodari Foundation, an India-based transgender organization that empowers the transgender and gender non-binary community through education and training in creative arts. Served in the Community Advisory Board for Fordham's HIV and Drug Abuse Prevention Research Ethics Training Institute, RETI, funded through National Institute on Drug Abuse, and currently leads the indivisible Coniho LGBTQ+, I'm saying that right, Coniho? Civil rights organization and active volunteer with Trans Can Work Diversity Collective, PF Flag, and F Fluid in Ventura County, among many others. Good evening, ma'am.
Hi, I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to the session. I know it's a little late for you in India, but I thought, let me get into a call and talk to you about some of the experiences that I've had both living in India and also living in the US. So I just want to introduce myself. My name is Celia, as you said. Thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Celia Sandhya Daniels, and I am an Asian immigrant. I was born and brought up in India, and I'm an entrepreneur, musician, photographer, hiker, blogger. I'm a parent. I'm a dad of a 21-year-old daughter, and I'm also a husband to my wife. And both of them are cisgender women. I'm so proud to be a trans woman, and most of all, I identify as a non-op trans person. Now, there's a lot of ideas around people who are trans in India who are probably, I would say, more traditional transgender community, like the Hijra community. And then people who are non-traditional, probably they are in the industry, they are working in certain companies, they're already there, they're doing a lot of work, but they're not being able to come out. So there are lots of people, and I would say, depending upon how India is organized and how the way India corporate industry is, not many corporate folks come out as trans because of the stigma and the ostracization that still exists in our community. So I'm glad to be a part of this group because I'm hoping to educate some of you, and also at the same time, I also want to answer some of your questions. That's one of the things that I want to do. So I was born and brought up and raised in India, in Chennai. And when I was 4 years old, I knew I was different. I told my mom I wanted to be a girl. This was in the early 70s. It was very different. I first came out and said, Mom, I want to be a girl. And my mom thought it was cute. She dressed me up, took pictures of me. But to me, I didn't realize that gender was very fluid till I was 7 years old. There was a point in my life where my mom told me that, you cannot be dressing like a girl because you're a boy. And at that instance, I was thinking, can I be in both genders? I want to be a girl. I love being a girl. And it wasn't possible based on the social constructs created by the colonial government, British. There was a lot of binaries that exist and so much of patriarchy that exists in India, which doesn't allow a lot of trans folks like myself to come out. So I suppressed my femininity and I learned to survive. I wanted to, as much as I wanted to be a girl, I wanted to enjoy just my femininity was so overwhelming that I wanted to enjoy my femininity. At the same time, I wanted to also enjoy the male privilege of being a boy. It was fun because men were in a point where, you were a little bit above women. That's how the social construct was in India at the time.
Yes.
I'm talking about early 70s. So it was for me to be kind of dabbling with both genders, and I was thinking, I want to come out, and I was attracted to women. I wasn't attracted to boys. So that caused a lot more confusion because my sexual orientation was still, I was born as a cisgender man, but at the same time, my gender identity was in my chosen gender. So my birth gender is male, but my preferred gender or my chosen gender would be female. So this is where the gender dysphoria comes in, and a lot of people don't know about it because gender dysphoria is trying to be in a gender that you prefer other than the gender that you're born. And when you try to switch between genders, it causes a lot of dysphoria. It causes a lot of trauma to people. And, the medical community is still dabbling with it. They're still trying to understand how this works. And CDC, with the Center for Disease Control in US, had actually mentioned that gender dysphoria is a mental illness. And being trans also was considered as mental illness. Only late in a couple of decades back, they just took this away from CDC and they said, this is not going to be considered as a mental health or mental illness. But there are people in India who are still struggling with it. And I think a large population of India are still struggling with it. So just quick fact. While I was growing up, I woke up every morning and thinking that I don't want my friends to know that I am having a feminine side of me. So I would try to act up, try to act more in my, I would say I wanted to be more macho, the male privilege or whatever the privilege that I had. I was trying to play hockey, field hockey, cricket, baseball, volleyball, and anything that I could prove myself that I was not a feminine person. I was very scared at the time that I didn't want people to call me as a sissy boy because that's what I wanted, and that's such a humiliation, especially growing up in a very conservative school and environment. I studied in a Kendra Vidyalaya, so I learned a little bit of Hindi and Sanskrit and a lot of other languages while I was in my school. Growing up was very tough for me because every day I would see my classmates. It was a co-education, so I would see the girls and I would think that I just wish I was a girl. Why can't I be a girl? Every day, this is a thought that was always running in my mind, and then I was dabbling with, no, I think it's not good for me to be a girl because I want to be a boy. It's intense, and what happens is the trauma starts piling up. It starts cascading a little bit more. And I didn't realize that I was going through this gender dysphoria, which was causing a lot more issues. Now, the interesting thing was this. I wouldn't say interesting. I would say every person in India is going through this, and I wanted to bring it up. It's probably going to cause some kind of a trigger warning, but I just thought I had to mention it. I was molested by my uncle when I was in my 4th grade. And I didn't know how to tell my parents about it because it was very traumatic for me. And so I just I just suppressed it and I said, you know what, it's okay. I'm not going to tell anyone because it's a lot of shame.
Mhm.
And I didn't know how to express it because it was one of my family relatives. And I didn't want to tell my parents because it would cause a lot more issues within our own relative community. So I just suppressed it and I just moved on. Just 2 years that my cousin, he molested me again. Now,
I apologize for that.
no, that's fine. I mean,
No.
yeah, no, things a little bit loud there. So I didn't know at the time. I started blaming myself. And I said, this is because I'm different and they don't get to me. Maybe I'm trans or probably they see through me. And I took the blame for all that they did. And they just walked like nothing happened. They woke up in the morning like nothing happened. And that's what a lot of people are going through today. A lot of a lot of people who are in the vulnerable community are going through today. This is where I think as lawyers, the legal system in India needs to change. And there has
Mhm.
to be as repercussions for people who are molesting children, adults who are doing this kind of thing. And this is something which I think needs to change through the Me Too movement that even happened in US. I hope a lot of that goes in India. And the rape culture is worse in India. These kind of things need to change, absolutely. There
Definitely.
So it was layering up. I didn't know what to do. I was so confused, and I couldn't tell my mom. I was already going through gender dysphoria. I was going through this femininity, and I didn't know how to explain. So I just chose to live in the closet because I was scared to come out. I used to see the community in the train while it was one of the times I remember going to Hyderabad. I saw the two Hijra women who got into the train and they were literally beaten or, they were threatened to kicked out of the train. Someone took the slippers and they started yelling at them. And it was heartbreaking for me because I identified with them, but I didn't want to be them. At the time, it was so scary because to me, I didn't want to be beaten. I didn't want to have that kind of shame. It was so awful, but I was it kind of motivated, my heart just went out to them because there are a lot of children who get thrown out of the house by parents because they don't understand. They just kick them out because they say, I want to be a girl, and they just kick them out because to them, they would rather kick the children out than get humiliated by the society. And that's how the parents were at the time. And I didn't want to tell my parents also. So I kind of suppressed everything. And I was thinking about, what is going on with me? I see some people who are like me, but I don't want to be them. Are there people like me who are educated and can make a difference in the society? Can I come out? I want to really come out. I want to be a girl. Is it possible? And that was my question. I remember in my ninth grade I came out. Um, it didn't go well, but this was. I remember coming out wearing a long skirt and a top, and I put a scarf around my head like a hijab, and I walked out. This was in the evening during my ninth grade. I was probably like 10 or 11 years old. I was walking through the streets and it was almost dark. And that's the time I chose because I didn't want people to see me. While I came out, I just felt so happy for the first time because the wind was blowing on my face and my skirt was blowing, and I felt like, you know, can I just live in this world, this little virtual world that I am in, which is almost a reality? Can I just live in this for a time, few days, a few hours, few minutes if possible? And I was walking through the road, and I was passing through a construction site when a man caught hold of me and he said, "Hey, what are you doing there? Come here." And he was drunk and he was a watchman. He called his friends and they started laughing at me. They started pointing fingers at me and they started saying that's a hijra. In Tamil they say umbodu. Umbodu is such a derogatory word for a trans person. And they started pointing fingers at me and started laughing. And I thought, okay, fine, you want to laugh, go ahead, I'm just going to go. And they didn't allow me to go because they caught hold of me and said, "Where's your dad? We're going to take you to your dad. People like you are such a disgrace and you shouldn't be doing this." I didn't know what to do, and they started yelling at me. They were so angry at me at the point in time. I was just standing there and thinking, okay, I know you're angry. I didn't do anything. I didn't rob. I didn't steal. But why are you angry at me? That's the first time I faced hatred. And it was so in their eyes that I thought they would even burn me that day. They would just pour kerosene on you, or they would just tie me up, or they would just, do whatever. They wanted to get rid of me. They were so angry. And the only way they felt that they wanted to express their anger is they were ready to beat me up. And I was standing there, and they were, the crowd started increasing. There were 12 people, women came in, or they all stood around me and they were just watching. And these men were standing next to me. I could feel their breath, alcohol on my close to my neck, and I was standing there thinking, oh, this is it. I don't know what to do. And I was so scared, and I thought, okay, I'm never going to tell them who my dad is, because they're going to go through a lot of shame. I stood there for a while, and suddenly I started speaking in a North Indian accent because I knew Hindi. I started speaking in an accent where they got confused. They were like, what are you trying to say? And I said, I had to go to the market. And I said, my market jana hai, kahan market? And they were like, oh, they got a little confused. And they said, the market is there. And said, oh, thank you. And I just tried to, push through the crowd, and I was walking away. And they were like, where is she going? Where is he going? Not even she. And they started chasing me, and I started running. And I ran, I pulled my skirt up and I ran home. And that's the day I decided that the world is not ready for me. I can't come out, and it's never going to happen. And people like me, there's no life for me. And when children were growing up, they wanted to be an astronaut, doctor, engineer, or scientist. I just wanted to survive. I just wanted to make it through my high school. It was that bad in India in the 70s. And slowly, when it got into the 80s, I remember I just suppressed everything, and I said, you know what, I'm never going to come out. I tried committing suicide too, a couple of times, and I caused a lot of self-harm too, and there was a time when the air was leaving my lungs, and I could only see yellow around my eyes because the oxygen was going out of my lungs, and I was almost in the point of, I die or not? And I was choking myself on a plastic bag. And that's the time I thought I was so scared to die, and I was also scared to live. And a lot of trans people in India are going through this. And even if you're listening to this conversation, it might be something that you can relate to. But I wanted to encourage you never give up. And that's why I'm here speaking to you. I never had hope. And I went through college, I went through school, and I did well. I did my master's in computer science. I worked in Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore. I worked in the first lab in India that was doing research on human genome project. And I was one of the early scientists working in that project. I remember working in the crystallography lab thinking that, is there any answer in the DNA that tells me that I'm different? I'm a boy. Why am I doing this? Is there something in all these chromosomes, in all this research that tells me that I'm different? And I couldn't find an answer. Even in Indian Institute of Science, I felt like people who were educated were still not able to understand that there can be a spectrum between the binaries. It's not the X and XX it's not the XY and XX chromosomes that define male and female. There are XXY, there is YYX. There's almost 23 pairs of chromosomes, are different combinations that actually define a human being. I mean, I'm a biologist now, I know that now. But those days was difficult. And I got married to a beautiful girl because I was attracted to women, and I seriously believe that if I get married to a cisgender woman and transgender woman, I'll give you a quick example of what it is. A cisgender woman person, I think you know, right?
Yes, ma'am, definitely.
Just for the
yeah, of course.
Yeah, cisgender people are the women who identify in the gender they're born, in the birth gender. Like yourself, you identify as a woman, and you don't have any questions about it. You know you're a woman, and you're born as a woman. I'm born as a man, but I did not identify completely in the gender that I'm born, and that's why people like us are called transgender. And it's a spectrum. And it could be, even if I don't identify even 10%, I'm still a transgender because I don't completely identify in the gender that I'm born. And a lot of people in India still have that confusion around transgender, and they think I'm a crossdresser. I'm not a transgender. I want to today in this call, if you don't identify in the gender you're born, you are called a transgender. And within the transgender spectrum, there are pre-op, non-op, and pre-op, post-op, non-op transgender. Pre-op transgender who are getting ready to have a surgery. Post-op are people who have taken, done the complete surgery. They've done the gender replacement, reassignment surgery, and the whole thing. Non-op trans are people who have not done surgery, cannot do surgery for various reasons. Could be economic, could be social reasons, medical reasons. For me, not to have surgery because to me it didn't matter. It's not that I cannot, but I thought even if I do surgery, this is what I'm going to do. So enough about me. But moving on, I quickly got married. I got married to this beautiful woman, and she was educated. At the time, I was working for a corporate multinational company, Dun & Bradstreet, in India. I remember this company said, you are really good in what you do. Why don't you go to, we want you in America, and would you be able to work in our corporate office in New York? So I did that. I traveled to New York as soon as I got married. I was having a wonderful life here, and my corporate life started kicking in. I loved my corporate life, and I had not come out at the time. I was still Daniel at the time. I did really well in my corporate life. My CEO was very impressed with me, and I did phenomenally well. I started developing business. I was the first, I was the second, and I was running the second healthcare for my company, healthcare account, and I traveled all across the US. I established business, and I started interacting with clients. I did really well in my business life, but personally I was struggling. Professionally, I was successful. My company really recognized me. They said, they kept on giving me promotions, and I kept on traveling across the US, establishing business, and then bringing in project managers, help them train and then run the projects. My clients loved me. There were times in my life where I felt like when I go back to the in the hotel room, after selling a business or winning a deal, I would just remove my suit, put it out there, take a maxi dress or any dress that I had at the time. I would put it on, sit in my room and cry because I was dying inside. It was hard. And I was thinking to myself, people don't wake up and choose this life. It's not a fad. It's not something that you can say, oh, I want to be trans. Nobody does that. Nobody wants to do that. This is our life. This is not a lifestyle choice. This is our life. And it was hard. And I didn't know what to do. I had a 4-year-old daughter at the time, and I didn't know how to tell my wife. And I told my wife at the time. And she was supportive, but she said, why don't you go to a therapist and talk about what you're going on, because I don't know how to help you. And I know you're a successful businessman. Maybe this will go away. Forget all this. You're fine. You are okay. Don't do this. Don't do this. Don't dress up like a girl. You're not a girl. Like, sweetheart, I know I am not a girl, but I am going through something which people don't understand. I want you to know that I'm dying inside. I don't know. I don't know what to do. I spoke to him, and he told me I was gay. He said I was a feminine gay, which I don't get it. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I met another therapist in Arizona, and she told me that you look like a girl. Why don't you transition and become a girl, and you'd be so happy? And I said, no, I don't want to, because I can think on my own. I don't want you people to tell me what I'm doing. This is my life, and it's so important for me to make the right choice. I was at a point where I was in denial for many years. I didn't want this life. I'm just sitting in this call and talking to you, not because everything happened, but 20 years, if you just rewind, I was almost at a point of killing myself. I was at a point where I wanted to leave my family, leave my wife, and just run. And just, it was so hard. It's not the choice. I mean, it's not a choice, sorry. It's not an easy life for trans people like us, or gender non-binary. And I started discovering, I thought, okay, what is it that I am? Who is Celia? Forget about what the world is telling. I'm not going to search about me on the internet, but I need to know what the medical community is telling about me, because I was a person of science, and to me, science matters. And I started reading articles, I started looking at research articles, I started going through so many articles. I found that there are people who are born this way, not because, there are people like intersex who are anatomically born this way too. They have both male and female anatomy, and they're called intersex. And sometimes there are people who are born, but the gender is completely in the head. It's the gender is in your head, and sexual orientation is between your thighs. That's what they give you a very funny description, but it's very true. To me, gender was so confusing, and I didn't know what to do. I was thinking about, where do I go? Am I really like this? Am I a trans person? Should I call myself a transgender person? Because I don't want to use that word. It's so, it's not me. I'm an educated person. I'm an entrepreneur, like none of this matters.
Mm-hmm.
I took a pause and I said, I need to accept the fact that I'm born differently. And once I did that, things started falling into place. It was almost like a research. I started, okay, let me take Celia. What's going on with Celia? What happened in Celia's life? And I started writing a story. I started putting all the storyboard together. I started doing research. And I was reading articles from WPATH. I was reading articles from John Hopkins, Stanford, Harvard Medical, research from Europe. All these articles, when I started reading, I found that there are so many things which are defined in the medical community that's never brought to the public, because this was not the focus. You have 1.4 million adults in US who identify as transgender, and it's, compared to the huge number in the population in this country, in US and in India, huge. And the focus is not on that. The focus is more on other communities, so that's why there were not too many research done in this area. And I started thinking about it. I started going to conferences. I started reading more and more. I started trying to come out. I went to the bars. The only place I could come out where I could be myself comfortably is the bars in US. And I used to go to the bars, and people will sit there and ask me, how much. They treated me like a prostitute. And to me, I was thinking, I'm a well-educated person, and here I am. I'm like 3 levels below the CEO in my company, and someone is giving me $20 for a blowjob. What am I? I mean, why are people treating me like this? Why is it like this? Something needs to change. This is not the kind of life that I want, or I have to educate them. And while I was in these places, I was so unhappy, and I got abused by another trans person in the bar. It was very unexpected, and I didn't realize that, there's a lot going on in the spaces, and I was looking for acceptance in the wrong places.
Mm-hmm.
And I was crying in my car 2:30 in the morning, and I said, I am a father of a beautiful child and a wonderful wife. We've been married for 20 years at the time, and I was thinking, why is my life like this? I prayed. I'm a Christian, and I prayed, and I said, God, please change me. I don't want this. Nothing happened. And the more and more I started thinking about what's going on, and I also went to this place. One of my friends invited me, saying that, hey, Celia, there is an event in West Hollywood. Would you like to join? It's called Transgender Day of Remembrance. Trans people have got murdered in this country, and almost 85% of them are people of color, like you. They are black and brown people. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, so they murder you because you're trans? And he said, yeah, they don't murder you. So I went to this event, and I was standing behind the crowd in that room, and I didn't know anyone in that event, and I was standing there and crying because I could picture myself in those, and they played the videos of the trans people who were murdered. My heart was just breaking, and I was thinking, I need to save one trans life. Can I save one trans person in my life? If I can do that, I can bring that number 24 to 23 because I want to put my effort into it. I went to this restaurant, I sat with my friend and I said, what can I do? What do I do? And, he said, just be there. Speak up. We need people like you. Tell your story. And I never saw him after that because they all went in their own directions. And then I started speaking up. I started telling my story to the community, in my community in California. As a brown person of Indian origin, and an immigrant, my story was very unique to people. Oh my God, I thought India is okay. They accept people like you, and you are a third gender. I saw it in the newspaper. I said, no, not really. They just want to keep you at arm's length. They tolerate you. They don't accept you. There's a difference in that. I went to India and I partnered with my friend Kalki Subramaniam through Sahodri Foundation. I was there in the I attended a lot, and Kalki educated me more in terms of what's going on with the transgender bills and the big difference. And I started interacting with a lot more people in the trans activists in India, including Aher Abina, Rachna from Hyderabad. There were a lot, and Amrita. There were a lot of people I was interacting with, and I was learning from them because they were my sisters, and I wanted to make a difference in India. And that was important to me, not just here in this country, but I wanted to make a difference in India too. So I was I was an international ambassador for Saudi Foundation in the past few years, and I traveled to India, and I was very happy. I learned a lot. I spoke to the Hijra community. I spoke to the Arwani community. Now they're called Tirunangais. Kalki, put this wonderful word. Called Tirunangais, and I was there, and in Coimbatore, in Chennai, I was speaking to the Tirunangais in Velachery, and I started crying because I remembered that these are the people who were kicked out of the train when I was a child, and they were there, and I came back after many years, and I was just looking at them, and I started crying because I couldn't say anything, and it was just rubber meets the road. You really don't know at the time that I would never ever come out. I thought I will never come out. I'll just go to the grave and people will see, oh, that's just Daniel. But here I was standing in front of them saying that, I thank you for your courage. And I did. And I started talking to them. We started hugging each other, and they invited me to have fish with them. And it was one of the most best time in my life in India. That moment was a big defining moment for me. I stood in front of them and I said, you had the courage to come out and I did not, because I hid myself in the closet, but you did not. You came out and your parents kicked you out, and you formed a community. You lived in this community. If your parents had accepted you, you wouldn't have gone through this. I just lived in a state where I didn't want to get accepted. I didn't want anyone to know. There are three things that happen to a person when they come out as trans or gender non-binary in India. The first thing is they can go and join this community because they will get kicked out from the home. The parents won't accept them if they don't accept them. The second thing what they do is they kill themselves because they don't have a life. They don't know what to do. They feel like my parents are not understanding me, my society is not getting it, and everyone is treating me like trash. I'm going to die. They kill themselves. And the third category are the people like me who just don't want to talk about it. They don't want to even mention it because they feel so scared, and they don't want to tell their story. They don't want to come out at all in India. And I was having a group in Yahoo. I remember my friend and we had a group in Yahoo where we had more than 1,000 trans, and they were called cross-dressers at the time in India. And a lot of them were young trans, and some of them are professionals. And these are folks who never wanted to come out in India. They were dentists, doctors, scientists, engineers, and they were really, really good professionals, but they never came out. And slowly they're coming out. Even today, after 20 years, a lot of them just email me or they just ping me on my Facebook and say, Celia, I grew up seeing you. I grew up listening to your story. I was in high school. And to me, that warms my heart because we need to change India. We need to change the way India is looking at transgender community. they're looking at transgender community as, oh, I like this community. We will, we want to take care of you. We feel sorry for you. We want empathy. We don't want empathy. We want empowerment. And that's what you. So I started working for these organizations that started coming out as gender non-binary. I remember there was a time when I started speaking about, and I started getting involved with human rights activism. So that really helped me to be a human rights activist, not just as a transgender activist. So what I did as a human rights activist, as I moved on, I stood for gun violence, I stood for immigration rights, I stood for healthcare issues, I stood for school bullying, I stood for workplace discrimination, I stood in spaces where the minorities in this country was messed up. Black, brown community, Latinos, Filipinos, anybody who were not white were discriminated in this country. And when I stood for the Muslim community, I stood for the Sikh community. I was in spaces where I was not even representing myself as a trans person. These were not trans issues, they were human issues. I remember coming out to my daughter when she was 15 years old, and she said, "Dad, why are you dressed in a sari?" And my wife caught hold of my hand and said, "Don't tell her." And that's what Indians do, right? Don't tell anyone, it's okay. And I told my wife, if I don't tell my daughter, she is going to find out through the internet. And that's not how I want to be known. I took a couple of days. I brought her and I said, "Sweetheart, just sit on my lap. I want to tell you a story." I said exactly the same thing that I told you today. And this was my story. She accepted me in 25 minutes. She said, "Dad, I'm cool with it." I was like, "Seriously?" I said, "Dad, yeah, I have my friend. You know this person? He's gay." I said, "Oh, wow, I didn't know." Yeah, Dad, I'm fine. I think we have a trans person. One of my friends is actually trans. And I was like, "Oh, wow. Thank you for telling me that, sweetie." She was 15. Now she's 21. And she stood for the California delegates. She's one of the young Democrats who is an assembly delegate, standing up for her father. That's me. And I always want to be her father. I will never be a mom to her. I don't want to be a mom to her. And I told my daughter, "Sweetheart, I will always be your dad. No matter how I am, no matter how my gender is, I will be your dad. I will be your husband to your mom." And we've been married for 24 years. My wife, we all live together. And this is not what I expected. I never thought I would even get married. I never thought I would even have a child. And here I am after many, many years. And I was able to, it's just God's blessing. It's just, a lot of things that I learned around the way. And one thing that I learned was never give up. Everything might be, you will always feel like the whole world is against you. Even your trans community will be against you, but never give up. And the white trans people in my community said, "Celia, you're just stealing our space. You are not authentic. You have not transitioned medically. You don't belong to us. You are just a cross-dresser." And I told them that I'm going through a gender issue, not a dressing issue. I don't have a problem with dressing. I have a problem with my gender identity, and that's what I'm trying to deal with. And if your journey matters to you, where you want to transition medically, that is your journey. We live in a spectrum. We don't have to do exactly what the other person did. And that's another problem in India, because we just stereotype trans people too. If you're trans, you're economically backward. If you're trans, you are hijra. If you're trans, you just dance and perform in the streets. If you're trans, you're probably in a call center. And if you're trans, you're just doing an admin job. You know what? We need to change it. And that's one of the reasons why I came up. I work for companies like Cognizant, Capgemini, Quintas, and these are like top 5 companies. And to me, top Fortune 500 companies and top Fortune 100 companies. And I started my own company, and I now consult for them. I do consulting, and in fact, I'm doing a panel for a $25 billion biopharmaceutical in California. I'm educating them again and again and again and again about D&I space. How to be inclusive. I've spoken to a lot of companies, and I constantly do trainings. So I'm in the executive board for TransCan Work. This is an organization that empowers the trans community and gets them jobs by educating the organizations. It could be corporates, and educating them and helping them to be inclusive, change the policies, change the way that they are running the HR, legal, finance, the way how you can put a wrapper around these gender neutral issues like bathroom issues. So my goal is this: if this is my destiny and this is what I want to do going forward in my life, and I told my wife, sweetheart, if I want to do something in my life, I don't want to be a CEO of a company. I want to create trans CEOs. I want to see trans leaderships. I want to see a trans astronaut. I want to see that people like us are different. Elliot, came out. When Elliot came out, I was like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. And Caitlin Jenner came out, and she lives 4 exits from where I live here. She's in Malibu. I live in Westlake. So we, living in California, you see all these people coming out, and it's like, oh, everybody's coming out, so let me come out. No, it's not because of that. They are coming out because the society has started learning and started educating themselves. And when we come out, now we feel like, oh my God, so when I come out, people really understand me. So I can come out. I don't have to self-advocate. I was just in a call with Lisa Middleton yesterday, and she's one of the councilwomen who's the first transgender councilwoman to come out in this country, in US. And I have seen congresswomen. I have seen so many people. There's now a senator in US. We need people like that in India. We no longer want empathy or sympathy. And I cannot just be satisfied with these kind of sympathy jobs. We need to live in dignity, and we have to go across all intersectionality. Trans people who are Dalit, and trans people who are Brahmins, or trans people who are English speaking, or trans people from Tamil Nadu, or trans people from Delhi or Chennai, we are all trans. It's not that one person is better than each other. There are intersectionalities in this community, which we need to change. And that's why I've been trying to advocate, even in India. I'll tell you, I'll finish with the last story. I was in Chennai in a resort. I was sitting there. I was enjoying chai, and the waiter came to me, and he stood next to me and said, ma'am, I want to tell you something. And immediately what hit in my mind is, oh my God, they are going to ask me to leave because I'm sitting in a public place and it's a family. There are a lot of children playing here, and I'm a trans person. And I was just sighing, and I was thinking, will India ever change? Oh my God, why are these people doing it again? This man looked at me very concernedly and said, ma'am, आप तो बहुत different लग रहे हैं. And I told him, मैं तो हूँ. He said, ma'am, ऐसा मत बोलिए, आप तो हिजरा नहीं है. आप तो हिजरा नहीं है, ऐसा मत बोलिए. हिजरा तो वो लोग हैं. I said, वो लोग कौन है वो? He said, oh look, they're dancing in the temples, and he started going on and on about it. I said, they came out, I didn't come out. That's the only difference. And I told you Hijra because that's the only way you understand. And he said, and the one question I asked him, are you nice to those people? He said, ma'am, मैं सच बोल रहा हूँ, ऐसा लोग तो पसंद नहीं है मुझे. And I said, why do you like me and why don't you like them? And he said, ma'am, आप तो पढ़े हैं, आप तो बहुत नौकरी में हैं. You look great. You're from US, ma'am, up to US में हैं. I said, look, I just have this because I didn't come out and I was able to study. If you have given education to this trans community, they won't be in the street. Nobody wants to be a sex worker. Nobody wants to be begging. Nobody wants to dance in a wedding. We want to have our lives. That's the difference. Will you please be nice to the trans community? If you're nice to me, please be nice to them. That man immediately said, ma'am, he shook his head, our Indian Bob. He said, ma'am, मैं करूँगा. And then he brought his friends from, he was from UP. And he was speaking Oriya at the time, and he brought his friends and he spoke in Oriya and said, "Ye to Celia ma'am hai." And they all took a picture with me, a selfie with me. And all the people in that restaurant, they're all sitting and looking at me like, who is this lady? She's a trans and she's a celebrity. Or they're taking a picture with her. I felt so good. And that's not where I want to stop. I want every trans person to be in that stage where they are respected with dignity, they're treated with dignity. And even us as trans people, sometimes when we try to segregate that, oh, you are all in, you're not educated, and so the government policies are workable for you. It's good for you. I'm trans and I'm educated. I'm good. When we stop putting those boundaries, I think that's when we will move forward. And that's so important for us. I know I've gone a little bit about my story, but my passion is to create this kind of global event. So what I do today is I'm the vice president of Stonewall Democrats. I'm a part of California policy changes. I've written policy for California endowment through the Trans Latino Coalition. So I found that there are people like me in every nationality, every ethnicity. So I work with the Latino community, I work with the Black community, the Filipino community, the Asian community. So yesterday I was on a call for the Hate Asian campaign. I just said that as a trans person, I want to stand next to you and support you. Because when we go through issues, sometimes we forget that I'm trans, that's not a trans issue, I'm not going to participate because it's not a trans issue. It's a human issue. And that is what is important as trans people. It's not all about me, it's not all about me. It's about a human issue. When someone is getting killed, is getting beaten, I want to be there. I want to stop the gun violence because my daughter's friend lost her life there. She died in that borderline shooting in Thousand Oaks a couple of years back. My heart just went out and I started standing up for that. I started standing up for the healthcare issues, started standing for mental health issues. There's a lot to do in this country. There's a lot to do in India. And I don't want some of these government policies just to be for the Hijra community, which is probably around 500,000 in India, versus the 9 million people who are invisible like me, trans men, gender fluid, gender non-binary, gender queer. There are a lot of people who have not come out. And they look at a company and they say, oh, there's a trans person in my company. Oh, we have hired a trans person. Don't brand your company with a trans person. Don't brand your company with a trans person. Empower that person. And don't be just, the change in every company needs to come from the letterhead. It doesn't come from the letterhead of the company, but from the heart of the employees. The CEO doesn't say, call the HR person and say, wow, you did a great job. I like what you're doing with the trans community. Keep doing it. I tell you, those CEOs will never move forward. The CEOs in India needs to be like Samir, who was the KPMG CEO. I was so proud to be in a panel with him. And he said, I'm so proud to be in a panel where we want to help the trans community. They are out there trying to talk about trans community. I was in a call with Goldman Sachs in India through Periphery. And Neelam invited me for that meeting, and I was so happy to be speaking to Goldman Sachs. And I'm happy to speak to all these organizations because we need to move the needle from where they are today, not to the point of tolerance, not to the point of sympathy, not even to the point of empathy, but to the point of empowerment. And that's my message today. If I want to leave you with a thought, especially if you're a US audience, we as trans people, we as gender non-binary people need to make this change right from the bathroom to the boardroom. And my allies are women, my allies are men, my allies are intersectionalities, disabled community, veterans, Black, brown people, everybody, they're all my allies, they're my intersectionalities, and I work with them today. And I stand up for the issues. So let's go out of our way and fight for human rights issues. And that's what makes a big difference in this country, even in India too. I just want to pause and take some questions from you. I know I'm rambling around.
No problem, ma'am. It was such a big honor to have you. I listened to your whole story and I felt like I instantly felt more stronger. Like after seeing you, I was like, maybe I can do, even if it's a bit different, maybe I can do everything that I've dreamt of and wished for as well. And I think it's very important as future lawyers to not only just live in the words, but to do something. And I hope our audience can make that difference in ourselves as well.
Yeah, I'm
So,
confident that Legalify India will make a difference, and you folks are giving a platform, and I'm so glad we are doing this. So.
ma'am, maybe start with the questions.
Oh, absolutely, please.
Uh, First, I'd like to ask you about a little bit about your personal self. My first question would be: this question could be useful for almost everyone. Could you talk about your five elements, the five elements of your life: dream, doubt, denial, discovery, and destiny?
Absolutely. I should have mentioned it, but thank you for bringing it up. So when I was a child, I was always dreaming that I wanted to be a girl, and that dream was every child wants to be something, and that was the dream that I had. So I defined my life in 5 dimensions. So the first one was I dreamt as this beautiful girl, and I wanted to be this beautiful girl. Never happened, and then I started doubting myself as to, oh my God, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not a girl. I'm a boy. Why am I doing this? All kinds of doubt ran in my mind, and that's the time I was when I went through a lot of trauma in my life, both being abused sexually and even religion. Actually, I didn't mention that because when you're brought up in a Christian environment, and especially when you're thinking about, oh, maybe I'm a sinner, I'm going to hell, and God doesn't like people like me, too poppy hair, you don't exist. That was also a stigma that I was dealing with on top of all the other stigmas. So that was a time when I was doubting myself. That's the second D. The third D was when I was before I got married, and I was in denial that I didn't want to be called a trans person. I was okay with this terminology called cross-dresser because it wasn't very, it was kind of light. It's like a light coffee, it was like a decaf. Well, I just had this cross-dresser. But I don't want to be a transgender because that was too much. Oh, it's heavy. But you know what? A lot of us in India, we live in that denial. And I've been talking about it. I've written articles and blogs about, videos about when you don't identify. And that's where I was in denial. I didn't want this life. I got married and I thought, okay, I'm going to have a normal life. Forget all this. I think I can get over it. That was the denial sometimes we live in. And we think that, oh, this is coming back. It's not coming back. It's always inside of you. It's just that it's like when you're depressed, you get over it, but there is always some element of it kind of pulls you down. So that's the third stage, which was the denial stage. And when I was in denial, and then I started accepting myself as, okay, fine, I got it. I need to do something about it. I need to know. I go back to science and understand what is science really telling me. And when I started doing that discovery, which is the fourth D, that really helped me to not just explain to people about what I'm going through. So I've been able to tell my wife about it. And my wife accepted me after 17 years. So I get it. If your parents don't accept you, if your siblings don't accept you, hey, it takes time because they need to really know, and you need to put it in the right way. Don't go and tell your wife that I like to dress up like a girl. She'd be like, okay, don't dress up. That's what I did. So use the right terminologies. Find exactly what you need to say because you're having a problem inside, which is expressed outside. So you need to know how do you address the problem inside of you. And that's what I did. And that was my discovery. And the last stage is once I knew Celia is this person and Celia is a part of my life. And, I've created this community within my family too, that Celia is like a fourth person in our family. My brother knows about Celia now. My wife knows about Celia. I'll say, hey, I'm in this call, I'm going to be Celia. And it's actually very interesting because we have learned to accept. And that's the time I told my wife, I want to do this. I want to create leaders. I want to create more awareness in education. So this COVID period has really given me an opportunity to talk to a lot of organizations and also be in this podcast and panels. And so if you Google my name, even in Apple Podcasts, you will get a lot of stories that would come up and easily listen to them. It's either Celia Sandhya or Celia Sandhya Daniels. You can Google in Apple or Spotify, any of the platforms, you will find my story. Just pick one story And I usually tell the same story because this is my story. I don't have any other story. So that was my destiny. I always want to, I feel like this is my destiny, and this is why I was born this way. I don't want to pass like a woman because I'm not a woman. I'm a trans woman, and I'm proud to be a trans woman. So those are the 5 dimensions that I wanted to talk. But thank you for bringing up. I think it's a good element of the 5 dimensions.
Uh, Another personal topic that you're passionate about is while I think you've talked about it a little as well. While fighting for trans right, how my focus changed towards human rights. Could you elaborate a bit on that?
Absolutely. A quick short story. I came out in the community. I spoke in a public place, and the reporters came and covered my story. This is in my local community in Simi Valley,
Mhm.
California. This is where Ronald Reagan was buried. So just for people who don't know the place, I came out and I told my story. I shared about how I'm trying to live my life authentically as a trans person, which
Mhm.
the backlash I got from the newspaper article it was almost half a page article that came out about me. The backlash was terrible. I thought people in India are more accepting, but they were not. Sorry. People in Simi Valley are so accepting, but they were not. So what they did was they wrote in the article, and there were a lot of editors. This is a medical help. And I was so heartbroken, and I said, you know what? I was sitting in my car looking at all these. I'm sorry, I've been getting some calls. So I read this letter and sat in my car and I started crying, and I thought to myself as to what do I do? I can either keep sulking about it or do something about it. And when I tried to come out, people in the trans community in US, they said you are not medically transitioned, so you're just a cross-dresser. And I kind of felt like I was ostracized in different ways because they didn't identify with me. And even the trans community in US was trying to put you in these boxes that they wanted to put you. So if you're transgender, then they want to make sure that you've done your surgery, you're taking all the medicines and HRT and a whole 9 yards. And they started ostracizing everybody in these little buckets, and I did not even fit into those buckets because to and I have other medical reasons, and I'm not going to tell anybody. While I was doing that, I felt like there was a point in my life where I was just sitting and thinking, okay, if the trans community is not accepting me in US, and the LGBTQ community is not even understanding what I'm going through, what can I do? Am I going to just build my, I can't go and, tell them what's going on. So I moved from there to the cisgender community. And that's the time I saw an article on the Facebook that talked about gun violence. So to me, my heart just burned because I was like, oh, gun violence, I need to do something about it. Because I have been in NCC in school, I have used guns, and I know how difficult, if you're not taught not trained how to use guns, you can use gun for violence too. And there's a lot of issue in this country with gun violence, and the gun control is important. So I started standing up, holding a plaque about gun violence. I stood in the community, held a plaque for the trans healthcare. I stood there holding a plaque for the immigration rights when the kids were locked in the jail. The young children were locked in jail. I just picked up anything that was human rights issue and I was standing up for them. And to me, it just occurred that when some human being is suffering, I want to help them. And that's how it started. And everyone was looking at me as to, I don't see any trans person here and you're the only person. They said, Celia, what are you doing here? I said, are you standing for, the immigration rights? I'm here to support you. And they were so happy to see me there because I don't see trans people literally going and fighting for human rights issues, which are not even trans related. And to me, that mattered because if you actually take the ecosystem of issues around the trans community, it touches every facet of life. And that's when I felt like, this is important for me to do. And if I can make a change, I need to make a change at the policy level. Go to the topmost level where we can make policy changes. And that's what I started doing. I went to every organization. I started learning. I started participating and making that difference. So when I started moving up and up, I felt like, okay, there is a change which needs to, for homelessness, healthcare issues, incarceration. I went to the police station, went to LAPD, went to a Hollywood police station. I was talking to the police officers and I told them that, hey, I'm gender non-binary. Look at my license is saying this, and how do you deal with it? So I was educating them in a lot of times, and they were all learning from us. And to me, it felt more comfortable. I've spoken to quite a few police stations, and police officers are my friends now because I made contacts with them. Professors from the universities, children, MSW students, children in the schools, and changing the school board education. Why we need to have trans education into this. So every area in my community in Southern California, I felt that right from the time that the trans person is probably 4 or 5 years old to the time they're retiring, and how do we actually help, and what is all the areas that they're covering, right from workplace to the time the healthcare and social security, and finally they, even when they die, sometimes they bury them with their male name or the birth name when they have lived their entire life as a trans person, because it's so unfortunate that the families don't understand. The families come and they bury them with the male name. So there are lots of issues, and I was going through all that, and I wanted to make a change, and that's how I moved from, when I just saw that it's not a trans issue, but it's a human issue. I thought if you solve the human issue problem, the trans issue is a part of it, and that will be addressed. And that's what we're doing today. So my focus is more on healthcare. How do you change the healthcare policies? The healthcare system in the US sucks. If you're on the call, I want to tell you, it sucks. It's bad because it's so expensive, and 30% of the population, they don't have healthcare. Trans folks, it's very hard. You have to go and educate your doctor all the time. I educated my doctor. I told him what is gender dysphoria. He's asking me, what is gender dysphoria? He's from UCLA. Hello. Anyway, he's a good person, but I was like, you know what? I'm tired of educating people, but I will still do it, because not for me, but for people like me who come to the doctor, they will know what's going on. I went to the post office just a couple of days back and educated that lady that I'm gender non-binary, and she said, I'll help you. So there are people, we need to work patiently. Sometimes we have to be patient to change some of these systems. In India too, it's very yeah, I mean, in India, it's a different thing. I don't want people to look at me with sympathy. When I was in India, I didn't want people to look at me in sympathy, and they were all wondering, "Who are you? You don't look like you belong here." But and people are taking pictures of you because you're just a subject. You're an object thing. Those things need to change. They just objectify you. They just want to put you in the trans person and all that stuff.
The next question that I would like to ask is, how has been your professional career as a management consultant with some top Fortune 500 companies? Did being trans play a role in your career?
I would say right now it's actually very helpful, because I started my career as a professional in the industry. So I did a lot. I was a client partner for the companies. I studied the healthcare and life sciences space. So I'm a strategy consultant for healthcare and life sciences. And once I started doing that, and once I started coming out at work as gender non-binary, it was helpful for me to build that kind of and extend it to the trans community. So since I worked in the industry, I was able to understand what exactly is happening in the culture of these companies, how you can change it. Now, when you look at these companies, they just brand trans people. And the most difficult issues, even like, let's say women, veterans, have, people with disability or differently enabled. And then when you look at all these spectrum, and then you come down to the trans community, who are probably in the bottom of the food chain in the entire culture of the company, and they will say, let's hire 2 trans people because I need to show some numbers. So the important thing to me as an analyst, and I'm working on a lot of technologies today. I run projects and programs for companies, and I've done M&A, I've done engagements that are like commercially viable, where you look at different products in the company and then give suggestions and what technologies you can bring in. So from a technology standpoint, I can literally talk about AI bias and how the tech industry needs to change. But I can tell you one thing, in the tech industry, if you're listening and you're a tech person, I want you to know that the tech industry is one of the worst industry in terms of diversity, because you only have Caucasians and Asian Indians, a lot of Asian Indians. The diversity is very low. You need to have a lot more brown person. It cannot be a company full of brown people. It cannot be a company full of white people. The diversity is so important. And I remember Google giving me a call and they said, Celia, we have gender non-binary people in our company. We have trans people in our company, but they're all white, or they're all either they're white or some of them are Asian. But we don't have any black people. Can we hire some black community? I was like, what is this, kind of a quota? And I said, sure, okay, if you want to do that, let's do it. So I was talking to them in how do we hire the trans intersectionalities. So we were going to hire black trans men, and how do you change not just black people, but black trans community. So those areas I started utilizing my experience, and now I'm helping transgen work as well. I help them with how to run the company. We have a training platform. We do trainings for all the corporates today. We recently did a training for Warner Brothers. We did a training for Sony Pictures. We did a training for an episode where they wanted to introduce a trans character. So we taught them how to use gender binary language. Now, writers, screenwriters, and movie actors, I would say directors, executive producers. I have actually read 2 scripts from movie executive producers. And since I live in the Hollywood area, and they've given this script and they wanted us to review it. So all my experience, talent now came into play. So I started talking about how do you introduce more trans people in the right, authentic manner, not in a pitiful manner, in these roles, because media is important. If you have a chance, watch Disclosure at Netflix. That is a story of the movie industry and how trans people are kind of subdued in this movie industry. It's so important for you to listen to the stories. The other thing that I did was, as a musician, I actually came out with the first gender fluid music video. I worked with a lot of artists in West Hollywood, musicians, and they were all from different parts of the country. There was the person who recorded my video was an Indian, I'm so glad, because there was one Mexican, one Indian person, and there was another person from Cuba, not Cuba, I'm sorry, another part of Puerto Rico somewhere, and they were all sitting together and recording my song, and I sang in that song both as Daniel and Celia. I've seen people just stereotype in one space where, if you're a trans person, you can sing as a trans person. But I sang both as Daniel and Celia in that video, and I will share that link with you later. But these are things we need to change. I think we need to get out of that binary mindset, first thing, and slowly change. And that really helped me. So all my education that I had, all my talents that I had, I was able to put it into use now as Celia, and helping the movie industry or any other industry as writing, and especially in the D&I space. So I have gone to the D&I space, and I've spoken a lot about how do you make the change, not just in the boardroom, but in the boardroom, I want to have a trans person there. Unfortunately, if you look at corporate America, the Fortune 500 companies or the Fortune 100 companies, they all may have a colored CEO. But you go to the board, you probably will see a lot of white men in the board. Not even women I'm talking about, just white old board. I remember I was hired for an interview, and the person wanted to take my resume, and I said, I'm a senior director in the company. I want to be hired at a senior director level. And so they took my resume. Lady in the HR, she's a senior vice president of this financial company. She said, Celia, I can hire you, but I will tell you, we have in our executive level, we have a lot of white men, and they're old. I'm so sorry. I'm a white woman. I'm your ally. But I want to tell you, Celia, that please don't get offended if they don't call you. The only reason is because your resume is amazing, but they will call you for the interview because they think you are different and they want to see you. They're not going to hire you because you're a freak, and that's how they look at you. I mean, she didn't say that, but that's how they think. Oh, I want to see this person. She's trans and she's able to talk. And I got so upset. My resume was there with them for a couple of weeks, and they came back and said, we've been so sorry, we are so terrible. That's what we need to change. Bring them right from not in the boardroom. We need to have trans people not even just in the boardroom, but all the way from the bathroom to the boardroom. And that's why I think as a trans person, you can make the change, we can make the change. And as an ally, when you pull in these policies, folks like yourself will be able to make that change, because in a company policy, you have a lot of legal material too. Your birth name, your legal name versus your preferred name. Now, companies are slowly changing in US. And so that's one thing which I was able to leverage my experience, my management experience that I have, and a people experience. I like working with people. And my customer relationship, I've got awards from my customers, and my largest P&L that I was managing was 250 million. And I managed almost like 600 people back in India. I've developed BPO businesses in Pune. I have traveled multiple times. I've brought my clients along with me. I have sold all this. This is nothing to me. For me, if you wake me up in my sleep, I will just talk to you about corporate infrastructure. How do you do a build, operate, and transfer? I can talk about pharmacovigilance. I can talk about anything. And but unfortunately, when people just look at me, they think Celia is a trans person, and that's all they can remember. Unfortunately, that's how the world looks at you. So we will change. I mean, I'm
Definitely.
not hard, but we will change it.
Definitely. Now on to questions about our topic at hand. The first question is, at a time of major change today, how does one navigate customs and patriarchy simultaneously?
I think patriarchy is a problem in India and also in other countries too. It's not just a problem in mostly. Even matriarchy is a problem in UK. Just in patriarchy is definitely an issue, and the way I look at it is, in one of the things that I've been talking in my speeches recently I've given is about, and also I'm talking to a company today, is patriarchy is basically, if you take all the areas where men are dominant in roles, and men are important, but they are not so important to the point where they make decisions for women, or they make decisions for the intersectionalities. I'll come to the intersectionalities in India's context, but it's important for women to have the seat at the table. It's important to have women in the parliament, important to have women in the board today. And that is critical. And I've been in an organization where I spoke with the women in Diversify. I'm just plugging in for them as well. And another organization like Carpal, like yourself, and these are law students who called me and they wanted me to, train them in that area. So there are organizations where women empowerment is so important. And I believe in them, because to me, that's important. If women are able to get the space in boardrooms, make a change in companies, that's how patriarchy will slowly go down. And when you have meetings for women, invite men also, because they want to be your allies. Men should no longer be making decisions, but they should be working with you hand in hand. That's not the future. The future is not just women, but the future is intersectional identities. What is intersectional identities? Within women, there are women in India who are from different backgrounds. They might be from a low-income group. They may be from a different caste, which is probably an outcast, scheduled caste, whatever, Dalit kind of women. And then there are women who are probably think they are much more better than everyone because they have a high economical status, or they are Brahmin or whatever. They think they are forward caste. So those notions need to change in India, because caste doesn't drive. If you want to change the culture in a company, caste is not the way. I have heard stories about the companies that I work with in India. When I saw the culture so different here in US, the same culture in India was totally a caste-oriented culture. And I wanted to change that even before I came out. I was like, how do you change this culture? Because the caste system exists in India. We need to think about, what is the future? Men started things. Men started a company. They need to start getting women also in the same role, hand in hand, not just on above each other, but hand in hand, working with each other, moving to the next stage in life. The future is not just women, but intersectional identities. And only when you do that, like Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989, she's a professor in Chicago who talked about the future is not just women, but intersectional identities. That's how she concluded her speech. It was an amazing speech, and that's what I used today. And in the intersectional identities, trans women are also part of it. Trans women can be in the board. Trans women can be running in the parliament. Trans women need to be in these roles. And not because we are superior in our social economical status, but we are working hand in hand with the women, with the men. And that's how the future of the companies should be in India. So transforming patriarchy is really important, transforming these customs and culture and putting the religion into all the, religion should not be an issue in a workplace. And I know India is a very religious country, and they have so many areas where they feel like, my company, we have to based on a Christian principle or a Hindu principle or a Muslim principle. You cannot run a company based on your religion, because it is not the way to run your company. And I'm a Christian, and I do believe, in Jesus and most of the things that I believe in, but not when it comes to your company, because you will never respect another person, and that's the issue in India. The issue that we have, sorry, that's the issue in US. The companies, the baker, when they wanted to sell a cake to a gay couple, they refused to sell because this person said, my religion tells me not to sell this cake to you. You know what actually that does is, when I go to the restaurant in US and I sit down at the table, the restaurant manager can come and tell me that, ma'am, we don't serve food for you here because you're trans. My religion tells me, my faith tells me that I cannot serve for you. Now that has to go. And that's why we have the Equality Act. It's to not just include sexual orientation, but also gender identity as a part of it. And that's what Obama did. But Trump, unfortunately, in all this, when he was undoing all the policies, he took away that again, and now we are trying to fight for that again. So this country is going to change. I hope we won't have to battle with Republicans and Democrats going forward, but companies need to fundamentally change. And the policies are very different in every state too. So if the companies do not protect their employees and the state is still hateful towards a trans person, at least the company can be that mothership to provide that support. And that needs to happen in India too. The companies need to be more caring to the employees, and that's what is important.
Yep. Our next question would be, even after bills like the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Bill 2019, which serves to recognize and protect trans people in India, it still has serious flaws like its gender recognition through proof of surgery. Could you comment on recognition of trans people through arbitration of others?
The transgender community in India is, I would say there is a traditional way of looking at it where they think about hijras. Most of the policies and the government policies are towards this. If a person rapes a trans person, they get 2 years of jail, versus if they rape a woman, they get 8 years jail. Now, these are stupid laws. I'm sorry to use the word, but you have to respect human being as a human being. And your policies are not defined based on, the hijra community or that part of the community. And that's where I think India just ostracizes the trans community to giving the benefits based on their socio-economical status, or their backwardness. And they call them economically backward. Now they're trying to, consider them as economically backward so that they can give them some benefits. Why do you have to discriminate and then put them in a class in order for you to give your benefits? To me, that doesn't make any sense. The other issue that I find in India is they have all these policies, they bring in all these changes, but fundamentally the education is lacking in India, because there's no education. You can't just hire trans people and they can't work in a workplace. Like in Trivandrum, you hired like 25 trans women, and they are treated very badly in the workplace. They all left. A lot of them left in a few months, and that's the problem in every place, because the policies in the companies are not defined well. Even in the government level, it has to be defined well. The other problem that I see is the Transgender Council in India. The Transgender Council in India, the advisory board needs to be, you need someone to certify that you're trans. If you're trans and you're born as trans, you're trans. You don't need a medical certification. I don't need a medical certification to get a license as a trans person, and I got it. And all I had to do was admit that, okay, this is a form, so please sign this form. So I signed this form in California, and I am now as a gender non-binary. I didn't need my doctor's certification, and that is a problem in India, because how do you define a person who is a trans man? How do you define a person who is gender fluid? How do you help a person who is gender neutral, gender queer? You cannot. There won't be a medical certification for that. Even my license today doesn't say that I'm Celia. It says Daniel, because I have not transitioned legally in this country. Though my binary, it's still gender non-binary, but it's so important that the system needs to fundamentally change. So don't write policy in India and give a certification. And also, you need to have the right representation across India from different states to make that definition, because the trans community in India and Tamil Nadu will be different from the trans community, the way they're perceived from the trans community in West Bengal, or the trans community in Haryana, or the trans community in Hyderabad, or in Mumbai, or in Delhi, because they are all different languages they use. Jopas and Kotis and Hijras. There are lots of terminologies. There are lots of ways. The culture is very different. So you need to have a proper representation of the trans community. It shouldn't be just one. It should not be just North Indians or South Indians or only South Indians. It has to be a good mix, and a good mix of people who are educated in order for us to define. And I still don't like the fact that you need to get a certification from the doctor to say you're trans to get the medical benefits. So that has to change. So fundamentally, the policies need to change a little bit more. We fought for the 377 section. Now there's they decriminalize the whole thing, but gender identity is still a taboo in India. It's like a touch and non-touchable area. Why? Because the medical community is not really doing the job. I think the doctors need to educate themselves more on gender dysphoria, more on mental illness. Mental illness is not given importance in India for the trans community, and that has to be addressed as well. Mental illness, because they're born mentally ill, it's because of society. The society ostracizes them so much. The parents put them out so much that they don't know what to do, and they run away from home. They feel so mentally, and I was going through that. So those are the things that you need to consider when you put your policies around it. And the policies just cannot be only economically, but it should be healthcare benefits, mental health, and also education, and hiring at different levels within the organization. Don't hire trans people just in the lower level. Give them all blue-collar jobs and think that you've done a great job. If I'm qualified, if I come to India and I apply for a job, let's say in Tata or any company in India, I want to join as a senior director or a vice president. I challenge the companies in India today. Are you willing to hire me as a senior director or a vice president in your company today? I don't think so. You're not there yet. You have a lot of ways to go.
Yeah.
Not ready. Even in US, I have the same problem. And that's exactly challenging today.
The next question will be, with 56% reported verbal abuse, 31% blackmail for money, and 24% threat to life reported by trans people, it's evident that there's still a long way to go in acceptance of the community. What message would you like to give to people to bring about a change?
The change needs to happen with education. I think right from the school, education needs to change. The ones who, and in India, I will tell you one thing. You need to learn to unlearn a lot in India, because there's a lot of perception, and people need to learn about trans community. That education in the schools, so that the parents will not kick the children out. The parents will start accepting, and the community needs to change. So it's right from the schools, community, colleges, professors, workplace. The bosses need to know they cannot discriminate. So the change needs to happen at every level in India. It's probably going to take even decades for that to happen. It's happening, but it needs to happen at a much better system. And I would suggest the ecosystem around it, right? So if you're looking at healthcare, hospitals also. When you're a trans person, when you go to the hospitals, you get discriminated because there's a verbal abuse. There's a trans men. Trans men have different issues when they go to the hospital. They still have to do pap smear. They still have to do, few things that which are women because of their birth gender being a woman. So there are lots of things, and even men, trans women have to go through. Sometimes they go through prostate because medically the body functions are in the gender they are born, and the medical community doesn't understand that. They looked at my friend who is a trans man and said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "I'm a trans man, and I was born as a woman, and I have transitioned." So it's so hard to go and explain to the people in the front desk that you were a woman in your transition, you're here for a pap smear. It is exhausting. So in every area, right, healthcare and all these areas, they need to educate and keep changing. So the education is paramount in India. Education and training is so paramount in every company. And don't just keep it as it has to be mandatory. Like sexual abuse is an important course that everyone goes through, especially in the workplace. Make it as a trans sexual abuse also needs to be there. Trans education needs to be there. If your teammates are, if you have one person in your team out of 10 people who's trans, you need to know how to work with them. You can't just discriminate. You can't just say, "Hey, I like your skirt. What are you wearing today? Oh, what is under your skirt?" Terrible, terrible place. I'll tell you, that's not the way you talk to any woman, even if it's a trans woman. You don't ever do that. So there's a lot of education that needs to happen, I would say. And the community has to change. The religious places has to change, because that is another stigma we have in India, right? So in churches, they think you're a trans, you cannot go to a church. And that's so bad. And sometimes trans people don't even want to go to the temple because this particular god doesn't allow them to go. A lot of trans folks have actually told me that I go to this particular temple because they are more open. This is a Hanuman temple, I can go there. Or this is a Rama temple. But I can't go to this particular temple because it doesn't accept trans people. I was like, wow, it's terrible. So education in every facets of life and every ecosystem around the community has to change. I would say education and making sure the education and the medical community. So when you educate, the medical community gets it, and then they start putting the policy makers. They start working with the policy makers to make these changes. And only then it will succeed. You just can't wake up one day and say, "I'm going to have a policy because, my friend is trans and they've had this issue." It has to have a particular science base for every decision you make.
What do you think of the patriarchal belief that sexes are different or have different capabilities? I think this is a very common myth slash truth that people like to use as a weapon of sorts. What do you say about it?
So the sex is defined as what is between your thighs, and gender is defined as what is in your head. The other way to define it is sexual orientation is to whom you bed with, and gender identity is how you bed as, and there's a big difference. It's gender identity in your head, and that's why. And sexual, you don't define a person based on the sexual orientation or whom they are attracted to. That's not how you define a human being. You define a human being, based on what they would like to be defined as. If I'm a person, you don't look at me as, okay, whom are you attracted to, so I can address you that way. Oh, Celia, so you're attracted to women today, so you're still a man then. No, it's not. I like to call a trans lesbian. That's my thing, because I'm still attracted to women. And ask people how they would like to be recognized. And that's why pronouns are so important. When you ask someone, "Hey, sorry, can you please tell me your pronouns?" "I'm Celia, I go by she, her pronouns." Or you can say, "I'm so and so, and I go by female pronouns." So when you address someone that way, then they will understand that much more better. And so sexual orientation and gender identity are different. I have a lot of training classes that I do. I would love to, give you some training course later. But those are areas where I have defined very clearly as about cisgender and transgender and the categories within transgender, and also explaining about the different gender, sexual orientation. Also, that's a spectrum, like pansexual, bisexual. There's so many other spectrum within the sexual spectrum too. So gender and sex, these are just binaries, and sorry, not binaries, these are just a spectrum. So we can't just define it as male and female and just male and female every time. It's not always that.
Mhm. Uh, with trans individuals being on a higher risk of mental health problems, could you give some advice on how to balance being outspoken yet practice self-compassion?
I think that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this call, because I was in a support group and I was talking to my friends in the support group, and predominantly 90% of them are trans in that support group. And they asked me one question: Celia, how are you able to tell your story every day, waking up and telling your story again and again and again? Because to me, even to explain to a person in Walmart for 10 minutes that I'm trans, it just takes the toll out of me. And that's why it's important for, if you are an activist, you're called to do this thing because you're actually paving way for people who cannot speak up, who find it very traumatizing for them to be telling their story every day. I'm trans, this is my... So there are people, and I'm very happy to do that. Even 1,000 times you wake me in a day and tell me, I will tell you. I will tell you my story, I will tell you how to change. And that's why it's important for trans activists and allies like yourself to clear the way for the trans people. If you're going to, let's say, suppose your organization is hiring a trans person to do your admin work. Now, you just don't go and hire a trans person. You first educate yourself, you educate everybody in your organization, and then you make the ship ready. And then you hire this trans person and say, can you come on board? And this is how we run. Now the trans person will understand that they are able to work with them and it won't be an issue. Many times what happens is, if you look at the data the companies have, they just hire trans people and then they leave. Trans people leave after 6 months. And the attrition rate is very high. It's because the companies are not ready. And that's why it's important to train your company when you're hiring trans people. And that's what I do in TransCare work. We actually, before giving our trans resumes to these companies, we tell them that we want to train you. And we keep different levels like gold, silver, platinum, where every category has just a certification. Also, we give them a certification and conduct workshops. We help the company even in a team setting, bathroom setting, HR setting, medical setting. We give them all those scenarios and walk them through it so that now the entire company is ready to hire a trans person. When this trans person joins the company, they all get it. They don't have to explain anything. One quick example is, I was just looking at a job description, and one recruiter called me, and I said, my resume says Daniel, but I'm a gender non-binary, and I go as Celia. I didn't say anything. Immediately, the recruiter said, okay, from now on, I'm going to call you Celia. Is that okay? So you go by she, her pronouns? And I was like, yeah, sure. Bam, that's it. Whenever the emails came, it was Celia. Whenever anything came, it came with Celia. I was like, I didn't have to tell anything because they knew it. That's how the world should be going forward. Training ourselves, right? That's how it really helps the trans community. That's a little small thing that you can, goes a long way for the person because you respect them.
Yeah. Seeing as people have difficulty understanding the concept of a third gender, how would you understand what non-binary is?
So gender non-binary is you don't identify in a particular gender. And sometimes the transgender community, it's more of, it's a spectrum, right? It's actually a spectrum. And within the transgender community, as I was explaining earlier, you have pre-op, post-op, and non-op trans in the whole spectrum. But in the gender non-binary community, it's not about male or female. They don't want to be known as male or female, but the people in the gender non-binary community are saying that, I'm a person on my own. I don't want to be known as male or female. I can be male or female anytime, but I want to be a person on my own. And that's why this the whole notion of gender non-binary came in. And a lot of them, 27% of the youth in California identify today as gender non-binary. In 2025, in US I'm talking about, in 2025, 75% of the workforce are going to be millennials. So when you look at millennials, the way they're working, and especially the younger generation, they don't want to be known as male or female because to them that is just a binary that's given by the society, by the community. So they want to be known as, I don't want to have any gender. And that's why a lot of these ideas are coming in, where you have gender neutral clothing, gender neutral bathrooms, gender neutral toys, gender neutral fashion, there are lots of concepts and ideas that are coming in, because the way patriarchy is so tight. Patriarchy has taken so much of, even when you choose a particular gender, you feel like the male are more stronger than female, across the world. Even in US, we never had a male, anybody, a woman in the White House. Of course, Kamala Harris is not in the White House, but she's the vice president now. Think about it, and you're changing it. I would love to see a trans person in White House later someday, but they're there, almost in the Senate now. But I think that's where we slowly have to change. And gender non-binary is more of a person who doesn't identify as a male or female. But as a trans, sometimes you choose to be, you want to be a male or female. But gender non-binary, you don't choose to. And that's why trans and gender non-binary are different.
Last but not the least, what does intersectionality looks to you, and how could we go about fighting for it in India?
I always give this example, and when those days when I got into a call, I'll say, "Hey, my name is Celia Sandhya Daniels. I am a non-op trans," and that's all I did. And I go by she/her pronouns. And then I thought to myself, "Wait a minute, that's not me. I have a lot more in my life." So I started introducing myself as, "Hi, my name is Celia Sandhya Daniels. I'm an Asian immigrant. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm a parent. I am an entrepreneur. I am a musician. I love science. I'm working in this area." And I started talking all about my hiking, my experience, and movie making, photography. And then I said, "Oh, by the way, I also identify as a gender non-binary," because that's how people need to introduce themselves. Because we have so much of, I'm 52 years old, and I have so much that I did in my life. Being trans is important to me, but that's not the only thing that I do, right? So that's why I'm a human rights activist, because to me, it's not all about trans. It's important for me to protect my daughter who had a gun violence, her friend got shot. It's important to protect a Latino friend, to stand up for my Black friend, to stand up for my Asian friend. And so the intersectionalities are important. So the future is intersectionalities, and that's my entire speech. And that's what I always talk about, and I'm going to speak to another organization today, and in one of my keynote address, and that's what I have. The future is intersectionalities. It's not just women, it's not just men, but people with different identities, people who are veterans, trans people who are veterans, trans people who are disabled, trans people who are entrepreneurs, trans people who are, astronauts. Or that's how the future is going to be in India also. I think that's what we need to look forward to for a wonderful future, and that's important for us.
Definitely, ma'am. This is again a notice for the audience. If you'd like, you can always ask questions. Until then, ma'am, like you said, you are a musician and you sang songs also, and you've done a music video. Could you share something that you made, or anything that you would like to sing or share to us at the moment?
Yeah, I can share the link with you, and you can post it out. The video that I've done for
Definitely.
It's the Transgender Day of Remembrance, the Black, especially the trans murders. I made a video about that as a song. So it's fun to watch, and it's very striking. It hits the message. It's in that.
Ma'am, we definitely love to see that. I'll just look for any questions if there are any. Since there aren't any questions, we would love to have a note, last words from you, ma'am.
I want to thank Legalify, especially for giving me this opportunity, because I have a 21-year-old daughter, and I believe the future is younger generation. And when you are able to be our allies and educate the community, and that makes a huge difference. I want to leave you with a thought for allies. A is acknowledge the privilege that you are a cisgender person and you can still help the trans community, and that's A. L is listen to the trans community. Listen to the stories and understand. The next L is learn to unlearn. It's not that what you learn is wrong, but there are certain things that you need to unlearn about the trans community. ALLI is to instigate tough conversations in areas where you think you can make a change in your company or in your organization or in your school or in your college. When someone is talking about something bad about trans community, you can always instigate that conversation and say that, no, I don't think so. This is how it is. So bring in tough conversation, instigate tough conversations. And the E is to educate yourself. Educate yourself about trans community. Understand, the questions that you asked were amazing today because a lot of them make sense, and I'd be more than happy to, talk in length about it. But just try to educate yourself as much as possible. ALLIE, and the last word is S. S is be supportive, not just by giving money, but by giving your time and also by getting involved. So that is the quick acronym for allies. And I want you to know that I want to thank you for being in this call and listening to this conversation. And I want to thank the founder and everybody, yourself in this call, especially for organizing this meeting at such a short notice. And my apologies, I couldn't make it yesterday because this is an important conversation the entire India and the world needs to listen to. Because these are not something that makes people comfortable. Sometimes will make you uncomfortable. But uncomfortable topics, uncomfortable conversations are the ones that will make a change, will create a change. And I want to thank you so much for this opportunity. And stay in touch with me. I visit transcanwork.org and also visit Sahodri Foundation. Reach out to Sahodri Foundation, reach out to Kalki. She's a great friend of mine, and we are like sisters. And I'm hopeful that, if you're supporting certain organizations in India, Sahodri is an organization that I work with. In the corporate sector, there's, of course, Periphery and a few other organizations I also work with. And in US, look for transcanwork.org. And look, send me a friend request. I'd be more than happy to accept your friend request on LinkedIn. I do a lot of my activism on LinkedIn these days because I feel like, there is a serious crowd there. And we do a lot of work in LinkedIn now, and also in Instagram, Celia Sandhya Daniels. And on Facebook, it's Celia Sandhya Daniels. And in LinkedIn, it's Celia Sandhya Daniels as well. You can Google my name. You'll still find, some of the links, and you can, of course, send me a request. And please let me know that you were part of the Legalify so that I will know that you attended this program. And please subscribe for Legalify. Stay in touch with them, and there's a lot that I love from the younger generation, what you folks are doing, and thank you so much for your time. I know this is a long conversation, but it's been a very fruitful conversation. Pretty late for another meeting, so I'm just gonna thank you so much. But you folks are
It was an honor to have you, ma'am. Thank you so much for giving us your time. Thank you so much. Take care, please.
bye. Shukriya.